The Young and the Restless Spoilers Shock. The hatred burning in Matt's heart had been growing like a slow, poisonous fire, one that he could no longer contain. What began as jealousy had transformed into something monstrous, an all-consuming storm of rage and rejection. He had convinced himself for so long that love could heal him, that redemption was possible, that Sienna could be the bridge back to the light he had long lost. But when he discovered that Sienna and Noah were not only together but were planning to get married, something inside him broke irreversibly. The echo of their laughter, the image of their closeness, haunted him in sleepless nights until his mind could no longer separate pain from fury. He felt mocked by fate, betrayed by destiny, and humiliated by the woman he once called his wife. Every effort he had made to change, to forgive, to rebuild, had been rendered meaningless in an instant. His pride, fragile as glass, shattered completely, leaving behind nothing but shards of vengeance. For months, Matt had tried to hold on to the illusion that he was becoming a better man. He worked tirelessly, spoke gently, even went to therapy, trying to prove that he was not the violent man everyone believed him to be. But Sienna had already made up her mind. Her eyes no longer carried the warmth that once softened his edges, they were filled with pity, an emotion he despised more than hatred. She told him she needed space, that she wanted freedom, that love couldn't survive in fear. To Matt, those words were daggers. He interpreted her departure as abandonment, a betrayal so deep that it erased every attempt he had made to be decent. So when he saw her walking hand in hand with Noah, radiant and peaceful, something snapped inside him that could never be repaired. He screamed her name in his mind, pacing like a trapped animal, unable to accept the picture of her moving on. He remembered how she used to look at him with tenderness, how she once said that no matter what, she believed there was still good left in him. That memory turned bitter. He began to believe that Sienna's love was never real, that she had been lying all along, playing a cruel game of salvation. His obsession grew day by day until it consumed his every thought. The moment he learned about their wedding plans, the hatred erupted into violence. He shouted into the empty night, promising that she would pay for humiliating him, that she would feel every ounce of pain he had carried in silence. It wasn't reason anymore, it was madness dressed as justice. Matt started planning what he called his lesson. He followed Sienna's routine, memorizing her routes, the cafes she liked, the clinic she visited. He watched her from afar, his breathing shallow, his pulse steady with unnatural calm. Every time she smiled, it felt like salt poured over his wounds. He told himself she didn't deserve happiness. He justified his growing cruelty by convincing himself he was protecting what was his. Love, twisted by rage, had become a weapon. He began to believe that if Sienna wouldn't come back willingly, he would force her to face him one last time. And so, one evening when the sky bled orange and shadows stretched long across the ground, he made his move. He waited near her car, masked by the quiet hum of the city. When she appeared, distracted by a phone call, he struck, swift and cold. Before she could scream, his hand covered her mouth, and his strength overpowered her resistance. The world went dark for Sienna as Matt dragged her into the back of a van, the doors slamming shut like a coffin. When she woke, her wrists were bound, and the air smelled of gasoline and despair. She saw the man she had once loved standing before her, eyes wild but strangely tearful, torn between affection and hatred. She pleaded, begged him to stop, to think, to remember who they once were. But Matt's face was a mask of fury. "You destroyed me," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "You made me believe in change, and then you threw me away." Her tears only fueled him. The more she cried, the more powerless he felt, and the more violence he used to regain control. He accused her of lying, of betraying him, of carrying Noah's child as an act of defiance. When she tried to deny it, his anger exploded beyond reason. The realization that she was pregnant with another man's child drove him into complete madness. He shouted that the baby was a curse, a symbol of her betrayal, something that should never exist. In his distorted mind, erasing the baby was the same as erasing his humiliation. Sienna tried to appeal to his humanity, reminding him of their past, of moments when he had shown compassion. But compassion was a language Matt no longer understood. He wanted control. He wanted her to suffer the way he had suffered when she left. The idea came to him like a whisper from the darkest part of his soul, a way to destroy not just her body, but her spirit. He took out a small bottle, filled with a chemical mixture he had stolen weeks earlier from a contact he met through his former job. He told her it would make everything right again. She realized too late what he intended. When he forced her to swallow it, she screamed, clutching her abdomen as waves of pain tore through her body. Matt watched her collapse, trembling but expressionless, convinced that justice was finally being served. Every sound she made, every plea, every cry, echoed in his head like a distorted melody of the life they had destroyed. He told himself he was freeing her, that this was mercy, not cruelty. He said that death was too kind, that true punishment was to make her feel the emptiness he carried inside. But as she writhed in agony, something in his chest twisted. He wanted to stop, to undo it, yet the same hatred that fueled him also trapped him. He stood frozen, staring as her face turned pale and her breathing weakened. For the first time in years, he felt the crushing weight of guilt, but it came too late. Sienna's pain became unbearable. She begged him to end it, to let her go, to stop the torment. Her tears mixed with blood as she whispered his name, not in anger but in sorrow. The sound of her voice broke through his rage for a fleeting second, and for the first time, Matt saw the monster he had become. The woman he claimed to love was dying because of him, and the love that once defined him had turned into the very reason for his destruction. Yet instead of killing her swiftly, he hesitated, because even now, part of him wanted her alive, wanted her to remember that it was him who held her fate. He sat beside her, trembling, whispering apologies that meant nothing. His hands, once gentle, were now instruments of cruelty. He realized that the hatred he thought would set him free had become his prison. The more he punished her, the emptier he felt. The silence that followed her final sob was the loudest sound he had ever heard. The room, once filled with the echoes of their past love, now reeked of regret and despair. He looked at her still body, her face serene in death, and for a moment he almost believed she had forgiven him. But deep inside, he knew there was no forgiveness left for either of them. In the days that followed, Matt wandered like a ghost through the streets, haunted by what he had done. Every shadow looked like her. Every sound reminded him of her voice. He could not sleep, could not eat, could not escape. He began to see her everywhere, in mirrors, in dreams, in flashes of memory that cut through his sanity like knives. He spoke to her spirit as if she were still alive, begging her to come back, to tell him it was all a mistake. The guilt that once felt impossible to reach now consumed him entirely. But punishment, when deserved, has a cruel way of finding its own shape. Matt's mind began to unravel. He started hearing the cries of the unborn child, the whispers of Sienna's last breath. He became convinced that she was still with him, that her ghost was watching, waiting for justice. He talked to empty rooms, left food on the table for her, and replayed their old wedding video until the screen burned. His vengeance had given him what he wanted, Sienna's destruction, but it had also taken everything else. The power he thought he gained turned to ash. In the end, Matt realized that death would have been kinder, both for Sienna and himself. He had chosen a path of torture because he wanted her to suffer, but in doing so, he doomed himself to a life of endless torment. Her death did not free him, it imprisoned him forever. His soul, once filled with anger, was now hollow, echoing with the silence of the woman he destroyed. Every breath he took felt like a reminder of the life he had taken away, the love he had poisoned beyond repair. And so, in a cruel twist of fate, the man who refused to let go of his hatred became its final victim. He lived, but without purpose, haunted by the ghost of the only person who had ever truly seen him. Sienna's absence became his punishment, and every heartbeat reminded him of the moment he chose vengeance over forgiveness. The world moved on, but Matt remained trapped in that night, replaying it endlessly in his mind, hoping for a different ending that would never come. In the eyes of the world, he had vanished. In his own mind, he was still standing before her, watching her die, whispering her name as the walls closed in. Because love, when corrupted by obsession, does not end, it festers, it devours, it leaves nothing behind but the ruins of what could have been. And for Matt, those ruins were all he had left, a monument to the hatred that consumed him, and to the woman who became both his salvation and his destruction. The sirens sliced through the Los Angeles night like the sound of judgment itself. Nick's heart hammered as he carried Sienna's limp body in his arms, the weight of her drenched in blood heavier than anything he had ever held. The streetlights flickered over her pale face, her lips trembling with whispers of a name he could barely make out. He didn't yet understand what had happened, only that something inside her had been broken beyond repair. The crimson soaked through his shirt as he rushed through the hospital doors, shouting for help, his voice breaking under the raw panic that consumed him. Nurses swarmed around him, taking Sienna from his arms, wheeling her away under the harsh glow of fluorescent light. For a moment, Nick stood frozen, his hands shaking, staring at the streaks of red that trailed down his skin. He didn't know that beneath that blood lay a deeper tragedy, the quiet, fragile heartbeat of an unborn child that had already slipped away. Sienna's world was slipping into darkness as the doctors fought to keep her alive. Tubes, monitors, frantic hands pressing against her abdomen, it all blurred into a fog of pain and fading consciousness. She could barely remember Nick's face, only flashes of his voice calling her name, promising that everything would be okay. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't. The pain in her body was unbearable, but the pain in her heart was worse. She could feel the emptiness inside her, the loss of something precious before she had even held it. Tears slid down her face, merging with the sweat on her skin as her body convulsed. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the doctors shouting about blood pressure, internal bleeding, and emergency surgery. Her mind drifted back to that night, to Matt's face, to his fury, to the poison he made her swallow. Her body trembled as memories pierced through the haze, his words, his rage, his voice saying she would pay. And now, she was paying. Nick sat outside the emergency room, his mind spinning. He had found Sienna collapsed on the floor of her apartment, the door broken, her phone smashed, blood soaking through her dress. He had called for help instinctively, not realizing that every second was dragging her closer to death. He thought maybe it was an accident, a fall, maybe something medical, but as he replayed the scene in his head, he couldn't shake the dread crawling through his veins. There had been no signs of forced entry, no robbery. Only violence. Only intent. He wanted to believe it wasn't Matt, but the truth was already forming like ice in his gut. He had seen the way Matt looked at her weeks ago, the madness lurking behind his eyes, the quiet obsession that no one had wanted to acknowledge. Nick pressed his hands to his face, breathing hard, the smell of blood still clinging to him. He didn't yet know Sienna had been pregnant. If he had, he would never forgive himself for not coming sooner. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the reach of the city lights, Matt was disappearing. He moved through the outskirts of Los Angeles like a shadow, face hidden beneath a hood, his car abandoned miles away. Every step he took carried him deeper into the darkness of anonymity. The rage that had once fueled him was now replaced by paranoia. He checked every reflection, avoided cameras, erased his digital traces. He told himself he was untouchable, but deep inside, he knew the walls were closing in. News of Sienna's hospitalization had already spread across the networks, and he imagined the city whispering his name with venom. But Matt didn't care about the world anymore. He only cared about vengeance, the unfinished business that still chained him to his sins. He had convinced himself that others were to blame, Noah, Nick, Sharon, all the people who had stood between him and Sienna. He believed they had poisoned her mind, turned her against him, stolen his chance at redemption. And for that, he promised, they would pay. At the hospital, Sharon held Nick's arm, her face pale with fear. The weight of everything pressed on them both. Sharon had seen too many tragedies unfold in that town, too many lives ripped apart by love turned sour, but this felt different. It was raw, personal, like a curse that had crawled out of the past and attached itself to their family. When the doctor finally came out, his expression was grave. "She's stable, for now," he said, his voice low. "But she lost a lot of blood. We did everything we could." Nick's breath caught. "She's going to be okay?" he asked. The doctor hesitated before adding quietly, "She was pregnant." The words fell like stones in Nick's chest. Pregnant. The world tilted around him as the meaning sank in. He sank into the chair, unable to speak, unable to think. All this time, he hadn't known. And now it was too late. The child, Noah's child, was gone. When Noah heard the news, something inside him shattered. He had been away, trying to give Sienna the space she asked for, believing she needed time to sort through her feelings. He thought their love could wait. But now, all that patience turned to poison. He burst into the hospital room like a storm, seeing her pale and unconscious, tubes running from her veins, her hand cold beneath his fingers. He didn't care about the doctors, the warnings, the sedatives. His eyes filled with tears that quickly hardened into fury. He wanted blood. He ripped away the medical wires attached to him from an earlier injury, ignoring the pain as he staggered to his feet. Sharon tried to stop him, begging him to calm down, but he was beyond hearing. All he could think of was Matt, the man who had done this, the monster who had taken everything. By the time night fell, Noah had disappeared. Nick searched the house, the streets, called everyone he could think of, but Noah had already made his move. He knew exactly where to find the man he once called a friend. The police were too slow, too cautious, but Noah had no patience left for justice. He found a gun hidden away in the old cabin outside Genoa City, a relic from his father's collection. His hands trembled as he loaded it, the metallic sound echoing through the empty room. Every memory of Sienna's smile, every laugh they shared, every promise they made, flashed through his mind. He couldn't erase the image of her lying in that hospital bed, fragile and broken. The child they had dreamed of was gone, and with it, the future they had built together. He whispered a promise to her in the dark, "I'll make him pay." Matt, unaware that the hunter was closing in, hid in a rented room under a false name. He shaved his beard, changed his hair, avoided every familiar place. Yet despite his disguise, the ghosts followed him. He couldn't escape the echo of Sienna's screams, the look of horror in her eyes, the sound of her body hitting the floor. The memories came at him in waves, leaving him gasping for air. He told himself he was still in control, that he had done what needed to be done. But the truth gnawed at him, he had crossed a line that could never be undone. And somewhere deep down, he knew that Noah would come. That knowledge both terrified and thrilled him. He wanted confrontation. He wanted to look Noah in the eyes and prove that he was the stronger man, the one who refused to be forgotten. When Noah finally found him, it was just past midnight. The motel was silent, the air heavy with tension. Noah kicked open the door, gun raised, his eyes burning with rage. Matt didn't flinch. He had been waiting. The two men faced each other across the dimly lit room, breathing hard, their pasts colliding like storm fronts. Noah's hands shook, but his aim was steady. "You took her from me," he growled. Matt's lips curved into a broken smile. "She was mine long before you," he said, his voice low and venomous. The air between them thickened with hatred. Noah wanted to pull the trigger right then, to end it, but something stopped him, the image of Sienna, the woman who had always believed in compassion, who had always begged for peace. But Matt saw the hesitation and laughed. "You're weak, just like her." The words shattered the fragile control Noah had left. The gun fired once, the sound echoing like thunder. Matt staggered back, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his shirt. But even wounded, he lunged forward, tackling Noah to the ground. The gun skidded across the floor as the two men fought, fists connecting with flesh, rage fueling every movement. Years of pain, jealousy, and betrayal exploded into that brutal struggle. They crashed through furniture, slammed into walls, each trying to destroy the other. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like the cries of the dead. For a moment, it seemed as if neither would survive. In the chaos, Noah gained the upper hand. He pinned Matt down, grabbing the gun again and pressing it to his forehead. Matt looked up at him, bleeding but grinning, a man with nothing left to lose. "Go on," he whispered. "Do it. Be like me." The words hit Noah like a blade. He saw the madness in Matt's eyes and realized that pulling the trigger wouldn't bring Sienna back. It wouldn't undo the pain. It would only make him another broken man consumed by vengeance. His hand trembled as tears filled his eyes. Slowly, painfully, he lowered the gun. "You're not worth it," he said, his voice shaking. But before he could move, Matt lunged again, and the gun went off a second time. When the police finally arrived, drawn by the sound of gunfire, they found Noah kneeling beside Matt's lifeless body. The blood on his hands was warm, sticky, and unreal. His face was blank, his heart numb. Sienna's voice echoed in his head, her laughter like a ghost he could never touch again. He didn't even resist when they took him away, didn't speak as the sirens wailed in the distance. Back at the hospital, Sienna opened her eyes for the first time in days, her body weak, her spirit heavier than ever. She whispered Noah's name, but no one answered.